So many of us have been brought up with the belief that we need to leave our feelings at the door. So we end up leading with our mind, and the way forward always seems pretty logical. However, learning to be heart-centered is really how we can lead through our intuition. And this means that what you are doing, what you're saying, what you're thinking is all aligned with what you are feeling inside. It's about listening and trusting yourself, which sometimes means that we need to put faith into something that you just can't see. So today on the podcast, my guests and I talk about the importance of slowing down and listening to your intuition, which will help you learn more about yourself and really understand what makes you happy. I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. And if you want more resources, go ahead to empowereducator.com/resources. Remember all the passion and vision you had when you first went into teaching? Feeling like building young minds and creating community through your work would make a lasting impact on this world? Well, those days may feel like they're behind you now because you're exhausted, stressed, and overwhelmed and frustrated, but I'm here to tell you it doesn't have to be like this. In fact, the love of teaching never really went away, but it absolutely needs transformation. Welcome to the Take Notes podcast. I'm Jen Rafferty, former music teacher, mom of two, and certified emotional intelligence practitioner, and I'm here to light the way for you. In order to create a generational change for our kids, we need to shift the paradigm away from the perpetual stress and overwhelm and into a life of joy and fulfillment. This is Education 2.0, where you become the priority, shift how you live your life, and how you show up both at work and at home. So take a sip of steamy morning coffee and grab your notebook. It's time to take notes. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another fabulous episode of Take Notes. Today, I have an incredible guest. This is Ben Yeh, who is a business and transformation coach whose career has evolved from being a real estate consultant, investment officer for a family office, serial entrepreneur, husband, father, speaker, advisor, coach, and overall student of life. Combining his investment experience, business coaching, and spiritual journey, Ben uses a heart-centered approach to guide people in gaining clarity in their purpose or their true north and live an enriching life physically, mentally, and spiritually. Ben launched his Boom Vision podcast in 2021, a show all about health, wealth, and higher self. This show dives deep on how to create a fulfilling, abundant life, and it starts with a powerful mindset. And I cannot wait to talk about all of those things with you today, Ben. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Jen. I'm so excited to be here today.
A lot of what you talk about is really aligned with the work that I do in Empowered Educator and talk about with the guests who come on this podcast. So can we just talk for a second about a heart-centered approach? How do you define that? What is that?
Good question. So the way I define heart-centered is that the thoughts you have, the actions you take are aligned with what you're feeling in your heart. And one step to becoming more heart-centered is not just only being 100% logic-based. Because when I think about myself, when I was in my early 30s, I was very much left brain, very much 100% logic-based, right? There's this old saying where there's no feelings and emotions in business, right? You kind of just have to leave it in a doorstep. But I don't believe that. Now I don't believe that. Before I did. That was a belief system that I had. But to become heart-centered, it's to be able to know that what you're doing, what you're thinking, and the actions you're taking are just in alignment with what you're truly feeling inside. I mean, how often in times, whether it was at school or in business or any kind of environment where all the data, all the statistics are showing you that it's going one way, but something in your heart saying, nah, it doesn't feel right. But you ignore it because you're like, no, but logically, that doesn't make sense, right? You should be doing that. And then in hindsight, when you look back, it's like, oh my gosh, I should have listened to my intuition, right? And that's the thing. Like, I can't tell you how many times, Jen, in my past couple of decades, how often that's happened to me. But now it's like, wait, if my intuition is telling me something, if my body is telling me something, I need to pay attention to that. I need to lean in on that. And when I do so, that's when I became more aware and just more heart-centered.
Sure. And it's a beautiful way to describe that. And I think one of the challenges we face is that we are taught not to trust ourselves, because from what you're saying, this heart-centered approach really goes hand in hand with self-trust and not only recognizing your intuition, but then acknowledging something that isn't necessarily tangible, that your logical mind can't process. So we have to trust the feelings that we have, but we're taught, especially when we're little, and then it gets reinforced as we get older, that it is not safe to trust ourselves. And in fact, we should probably ask 15 of our friends about a decision we want to make before we even recognize what's really in our heart. So can you speak a little bit about that? Or what are some of the challenges of people connecting to that heart-centered place of self-trust?
Yeah. So the question that pops into mind is that I often get asked, well, what's the difference between your inner voice and your intuition, right? I can't tell the difference between either. And then I make a distinction between the two because sometimes our inner voice, the way I described it in my show, is that it's merely an output of all the programming we have in our subconscious, right? When we're first born, ages 0 to 7, we're downloading a lot of different observation and programs that we see from our immediate environment. That could be from our parents, our family, our surroundings. And Dr. Bruce Lipton has said 70% of what we download in our early years are typically disempowering and negative. And so what that implies is that you'll hear 2 no's for every 1 yes. And so a little side story, Jen, is that when my son, when he first started walking, when he was like a toddler, he was like a little tank, right? His head always bonks into the corners of tables, and we had to put like these bumper stickers on all the corner tables just to make sure that he's protected. And I remember vividly there was one incident where he's about to bonk his head on a table, and I'm like, no, don't do that. Wait a minute. Within 1 second, I said 5 no's, and I didn't even say a yes. Okay, so why do some people have a tendency to see the world half empty rather than half full? Well, it's because we had all these downloads of more no's than yes. It made me much more aware of the language I use in front of my kids. Am I empowering them or am I disempowering them? So our inner voice, if we tend to be our worst critic rather than our best cheerleader, if we're very self-critical, just know it's not you. It's actually just programming that you just haven't upgraded from your subconscious. And so that's typically your inner voice. So the inner voice usually has more of a negative connotation to it. It might be speaking from fear. It might be speaking from lack. And the intuition, from what I've observed, is, and intuition, by the way, another way of saying it is your soul GPS. It's your internal guidance system. It's just merely there to let you know, are you going the right track or do you need to turn right? Do you need to course correct? And if you think about the voice of, depending on whether you use Siri or WhatsApp or whatever it may be, right? That tone is always very steady. And so the thing about intuition is that it's not typically emotionally charged, not negatively charged. It's usually very calm, and it's a signal to you, are you going the right track or do you need to course correct? And when you learn to lean in on how is it that your soul GPS wants to communicate with you, because it's different for everyone. For some folks, it might actually see a vision. For some people, they might actually feel something in their body. Other people might have a different tone in their inner voice, in their head, that's different from their inner voice. It just depends, but you just have to be able to be still and observe, wait, how is it my soul GPS, my intuition wants to communicate with me? And until you understand that language, then you'll have a better idea of when it is trying to signal and communicate with you, right? I mean, we're talking about, in informed education. So imagine your entire life, you've been taught English as the first language, and you haven't been taught a second language. And all of a sudden, you might be doing something, and then you're getting this word jumbled up, but it sounds like snow. It's like, snow? What's snow? What does that mean, right? I don't live in the mountains. That doesn't mean anything to me. And then you go on your day, and a couple of days, weeks later, and then you hear the word snow again, but you don't know what that means. But then if you take a moment to pause and you slow it down, oh, it's actually trying to say sí or no. Wait, it's been trying to tell Spanish to me? What? Right? And until you calm yourself to be able to quiet the mind and see how is it yes or is it no? If you don't pay attention and within your busy day, it gets jumbled up and oh, okay, so no, that doesn't mean anything. And you just dismiss it, right? And I'm using Spanish as a metaphor, but your intuition is always there. It's just a matter of, are you quietly calming yourself to see how does it want to communicate with you.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting analogy that you use. And I appreciate that because it makes me think of it in a different way too. I tend to think of inner voice as mind and intuition as body. So for me, in understanding the language of your body is really the key here, because like you're saying, if you never learned Spanish before, something that it's just being said to you in Spanish, you're not going to understand. If we are not used to listening to our body, that is something we can easily ignore. That stomach ping that you get when something doesn't feel aligned, right? Or like the tightness in your chest. And it could be so fleeting. And we brush it off so often as just like, oh, well, I don't know, it must be indigestion. Or maybe I have a little gas, right? It's like something like that. But if you're really to slow down, you would start to notice these feelings as hints of where you are aligned and where you aren't aligned. And for me, I can share just my personal story with finding what that feels like. I've described it before as almost like a metal detector, where I feel kind of like this beep, 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 when I'm on the right path. And when I'm pretty locked in, that is very clear to me. But that was not always the case. It was really in doing a lot of the work that I know that you have done also to be comfortable, first of all, knowing that I have an intuition. And then second of all, knowing the language of the intuition. And then lastly, learning how to trust the intuition. And I think that's been always the journey.
Yeah, I love that example, Jen, because the other analogy I use the car analogy a lot, right, on my show. And what I mean by the car analogy is if you're an entrepreneur in your business is just a vehicle, you are the driver, right? But your physical body, that's the car, that's the vehicle. Your mind really is the driver. And to take that analogy a little bit further, if you're driving like an electric car, if you have like a Tesla, for example, and you have this dashboard and you've driven cars you've been driving in the last couple of decades, which is there's forward, there's park, there's reverse, and then you have the speedometer and then the fuel gauge, and that's it. But there's all these other functions on the dashboard you don't know. It's there. You just have to understand the language and how it's being activated, right? You have a GPS system, whether you want to use it or not, it's there. And what happens if one day your dashboard is just flashing this orange sign? You don't know what it is. Is it oil change? What is that? You don't know what it is, but it blinks a couple of times, it goes away, and then you just dismiss it. Well, it's blinking there for a reason. It just depends on whether you want to seek to understand that or not, right? But it could be blinking, or you could have that parking assistant where if you're getting too close to something, it beeps just like what you're saying, right? Everyone is different. How it wants to communicate with you, it's going to be different for everyone. But having that said, it doesn't mean it's not there. It's just you have to be able to distill it in a way. And then so let's use an analogy in the form of education, right? So I want to use the words that your audience will really resonate with. So another example is if you're in an auditorium with like 300 students, right? And you're just one of among 299 students, and you have a teacher up on the stadium in a podium trying to say something to you. Now, if that was your sole GPS, if that was your intuition, do you think what it's trying to signal to you, will you be able to listen if you're sitting in the back row of that auditorium when you've got 299 other kids that are just like yapping away and talking about it? Probably not, right? It's a low probability. Not saying it's impossible, but it's a low probability. But if you're able to quiet your minds, because think about, Jen, how many thoughts are running through your mind on a daily basis?
Tens of thousands, yes.
Tens of thousands. And I'm just using an example of 300. But if you just pause, and then if it came through, chances are you're increasing the probability, oh, I didn't know that's what it was trying to signal to me. Now I've heard it. Now, once you hear it, it's another thing whether you want to agree with it, listen to it, or do something about it, right? But you're increasing the probability of being able to understand and establish, wait, how is it it's trying to communicate with you?
Yeah. And I think too, the big piece of this is being comfortable slowing down. For me, I grew up on Long Island and slow was just not part of my vernacular. It just wasn't. And even now where I'm now in central New York and things are a little bit of a slower pace, that's in my DNA still, Ben, like hardcore. So that's how I built my life of go, do, achieve, more, busy, hustle. And for a while, when I first came to this work, and one of the first things that, my mentor said was, we're going to try to slow down. I was like, wait, what? Excuse me? I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? If I slow down, then all the balls drop. I'm holding all the balls up in the air. I don't think I can. And that was actually the first story that I had to get rid of and let go of in order to even get my mind in a place where I was open to be quiet, to hear the things. I couldn't hear anything because I kept it so busy. And part of the reason why, and we might digress here a little bit and go in a different direction, but we can come back, is one of the reasons why we keep it so busy is because we're afraid of what we're going to find when it stops. And there's pain there, and there's wounds, and there's trauma, and there's hurt. Right? So you and I are talking about this from a place of we've been in this now for a long time, but going back to the beginning, even just the idea of slowing down was challenging to wrap my brain around.
Oh my God. Okay. So I'm getting an intuitive hit. So tell me we're in the right track here, Jen.
Good. Go for it.
I totally mean what you say. And let me explain why. So it reminds me of, I think it was like 2 months ago. I was at a parent-teacher conference, right? My son's in third grade right now. And in the education system that he's part of, we love our teacher. And the teacher was saying how early in the years, kids are learning to read because then they can read to learn.
Pillar of third grade. Yes. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You first learn to read, so then you can read to learn. And that quote always stuck with me. And then when I reflect back why it resonated so much with me is because sometimes people misunderstand what meditating is about. You actually learn to meditate so that you can then meditate to learn about yourself. You're not meditating because for the sake of sitting cross-legged for 30 minutes, because if I do that, Jen, I'm going to fall asleep within the 7th minute. That method just doesn't work for me. But that doesn't stop me from still quieting the mind, because meditation comes in all forms. It could be breath work. It could be yoga. It could be walking around the block in nature. It could just be doing something in repetition that you're just basically letting the thoughts that are racing in your mind to give it pause, to give it a breath. Because in that moments of stillness, you're going to start learning more about yourself. That's the purpose of it. And so that it just reminds me when you're talking about that, I get it. The first part of it might be really daunting. There might be, wow, this is just a giant leap of faith. Well, because you might not want to confront some of the things that you might have been buried because, if I just go, I don't have to keep looking back, right? But it doesn't go away, right? I mean, that Albert Einstein quote, energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transformed from one form to another. And that's the thing about energy, about positive or negative experience like trauma. It can occur. You might have a belief system attached to it, but if you bury it, doesn't mean it goes away. It's still there in you. And it might get triggered by other things unless you know how to express it and feel through it and let it go.
Yeah. Oh, it's definitely going to get triggered.
Yeah.
Oh, you're going to get triggered. All right. And the thing is too, part of this journey is to create the safety and understanding that the things that you're going to find when you slow down, you get an opportunity now to come from a place of curiosity, because you can't grow, expand, become a new version of yourself if you're not also doing the healing. So get one or the other, you get both. And it doesn't always feel good, but reaping the rewards of this, I think, consciousness revolution that you get to go through in this work is, I believe, one of the most important things we do in this world, if not the most important thing, because otherwise, what are we doing?
Yeah, totally. And I love the word you use, curiosity, right? It's that Walt Whitman quote, be curious, not judgmental. Right. I mean, I don't know if you watched that TV show, Ted Lasso. It's a great show, by the way. Right. That dart singing game, right? Be curious, not judgmental. Because if you just have that open curiosity and you're not letting your inner critic judge yourself on just being curious, opens a whole new world. You start asking different questions, which then profoundly can impact a different reality.
Completely. And that's something, we were talking about before we even press record, right? It's like, it doesn't really matter what you're doing. It matters what questions you're asking, which, by the way, comes from Neil deGrasse Tyson's book, Starry Messenger. Go read it after this podcast. Go get it from the library, order it from Amazon. It's a great book. But a lot of this work then comes from this idea of having a different mindset. And this really comes into where a lot of your work lives. And you have these 3 core pillars of building this powerful mindset. Can we go into that a little bit so we can kind of have a framework to start thinking about, well, what does this even look like?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for asking that. Okay, so let's go back to that car analogy, right? Can you imagine if you close your eyes, if you were driving and your windshield is completely fogged up, so you have little to no visibility, right? and you've got the music pumped up really loud, the stereo and really loud inside your car, so that if there's an outside car trying to honk at you, trying to warn you, you won't be able to listen to it, right? And then let's say your legs feel numb where you don't know how soft or hard you're pressing the gas pedal. If you just imagine that, that's like a recipe for disaster, right? You're pretty much heading into an accident, whether you want to or not. And why I use that as an imagery is because in life, if you don't allow to expand your imagination, what you see mentally, if you don't actually listen and understand or how to upgrade your voice, your inner voice, what you hear mentally, and if you don't tap into and understand the language of your intuition, what you're feeling internally, what you see, what you hear, what you feel completely changes and defines your inner world, then gets amplified to your outer reality. So if you know how to go into what I call the inner gym, right? If you go into your inner gym and start exercising and expanding your imagination, are you imagining out of a 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, or is the entire world your canvas? How limited or expansive is your imagination, right? Your voice or inner voice. Are you your worst critic or are you your best cheerleader? And if you can have that awareness, and if that awareness is telling you, this doesn't really support me where I want to grow, then how do you upgrade it so that it can, right? And then your intuition, when we talked about earlier about the feeling, is it signaled to you within a sense of feeling? Is it from vision or is it auditory? Everyone's going to be different, but that feeling internally, what you see, what you hear, what you feel, creates your inner world that then gets amplified your outer reality. So if you're not happy what's going on externally, then if you just pause and saying, well, what can I work on internally that maybe be creating this, that's manifesting this, then you're asking different questions and that might get to the root cause.
Yes. And it is always you. That's the thing. And what's wonderful about that is because even though you might be the problem, you are also the solution. When we point our fingers out to every external thing, then that's where we lose our power. That's where we become disempowered because we are handing it over to anyone and anything. And the only thing that we have agency in is ourselves. And we see this all the time, people just putting blame on their own way of being because of the circumstances that they feel that they're in. But in shifting that idea and using that imagination, being comfortable and dreaming bigger than that 8.5 by 11 piece of paper, listening to that voice, understanding what your intuition is, things don't change unless you change. It's cliche because it's true. You get to you're the change. Be the change.
Totally. Gives me chill to hear you say that because that's exactly it. And that's really why I created my podcast and the type of coaching I do is because it's really looking at what's the root cause. We can't just only be treating the symptoms because that's just the surface level. You got to go in deep to understand, well, what's the belief or limiting belief that you have that might be anchoring it, right? Another way I say it is metaphorically, if you're telling me your vision in life, your career, your business is to run the Boston Marathon or the Ironman. And when I listen to the words you use, because our language and words have energy behind it, right? If I listen to it and it's like, well, why is it anchored to the 5K level? Yet your aspiration is to do the Boston Marathon. What do you have to do to let go of that limiting belief so that you can upgrade your language from 5K to 10K to half marathon to marathon, right? It takes steps, but you got to be able to understand is the language we use, the thoughts we have, is it energetically in a similar frequency of what we aspire to want to grow to? Because if it's not and there's a gap, then you have to understand, well, what really is causing that gap?
Right. And I think that circles back to what we were saying earlier about this heart-centered approach, because it's about alignment in our thoughts and our beliefs and our words and our actions and our intentions. If they're not aligned, we're actually not going to the place we want to go. In fact, we're probably just spinning on a hamster wheel and wondering why we haven't moved anywhere.
Yeah. And it's really funny you say that too, because in this world where I have this love-hate with hustle and grind, right? Because when I think of those words, everyone's promoting in terms of entrepreneurship, it's this hustle and grind mindset. Well, not really, because when I think of that, I think of a hamster running in the hamster wheel. And it's like, gosh, it just every day becomes like a Groundhog's Day.
Sure. Well, and it's not just entrepreneurship, because if you think about the rigor, and I'm using kind of air quotes, I know you can't see if you're listening, but the rigor that's expected in schools, it is parallel to that hustle, do more, achieve, go more, 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 more. And, without that other thing that I know you're going to talk to you about in a second, the other part of this hamster wheel coin, we're just on it. And then to what gain? Where's the gain?
Yeah. And it's just, we're in this hamster wheel and all we're doing is just putting our head down and just doing, go, go, go without wait. Can you just pause and just pop your head up and like, are you even going the right direction? Because I'm at a point in my life, Jen, where it's like, I'd rather take one step in the right direction than 10 miles in the wrong direction. It's just, I'm so over that right now.
But then why do we have to wait until we're in our 30s and 40s and 50s to figure this out? Especially as educators, you are in a position right now to embody this yourself, because that's the messages that are going to be given to the kids in your classroom of what's important. Where are you going? Lift up your head. Are you even going in the direction that you want? Those are the questions that we need to be asking ourselves.
Yeah. And does it feel right?
Yes.
That's the thing. In the business context, because my previous chapter was all about in the business and investment world. And there's times where you're looking at a deal and it's like, well, I don't know if the partner is right. Well, but you look at a deal, there's a lot of opportunity to make money here. It's like, well, yeah, but if you're not feeling right with the people you're with, then what's really the point? And how often does it actually pan out for it to actually make it a win? Usually it pans out for a lose because the pieces weren't right. There was no alignment. And I had to learn the hard way. Wow, that alignment piece, I wish we would have been taught that early in life so that if we can lean in more. One dad, proud dad moment is I always drop off my kids in the morning. And there's always this one section of the route where it might be backed up on a stop sign, right? And right before we go to that, I always just ask both of my kids, hey, just use your intuition. Do you think we should stay on the right or should we go the shortcut? And whatever they say, I'm not even going to process and think about it. I just do what they say because I want them to practice, whether it's right or not. I want you to lean in on that. And now it's like, if we hit all of a sudden this road hazard, my son's like, hey, my intuition is saying just make a left. Really? Okay, I'm not even going to doubt it. I just want to go with it because he's actually even using the word intuition. I didn't use that until a couple of years ago, right? And he's using it now when he's like 8. It's just, oh gosh, I just wish they're able to teach that more. That becomes more of a commonplace,
Yeah. Oh, I'm definitely going to be doing that with my children now. I think it's so small. And that's the thing. I think, when we start getting into the weeds about this, it seems at the surface, like it's just so hard and complicated. And there's just another thing on my plate that I have to think about. And in fact, like your intuition is the plate. That actually is the plate. And so if we take a moment to acknowledge and then empower kids, either your kids or the ones that we work with, that they have agency in listening to themselves, that's really the secret sauce.
100%. 100%. It mind boggles me why we got to this place where that's not commonplace. But at the same time, now that we have that awareness, how do we just spread that light and that message more? Because like you said, having that agency to be able to know you have the ability to do so and tap in at any time you want can be so free and powerful at the same time.
Yeah. And we know how we got here. We know how we got here. That's another podcast episode. But yes, but now that we know, we can't unknow. And I really do believe that this is part of this idea. And I've said this and spoken about this with other guests on this podcast too, of this consciousness revolution where we are actively discovering what's possible by raising our level of consciousness and unsubscribing to the default and the autopilot in which we've lived our lives up until now, and getting really clear about the stories that have the limitations that we place on ourselves. So we can actively then say, is this story serving me right now? I'm getting triggered by this student or by this parent or this boss right now. What's happening to me? What is going on? And getting curious, and then curious again, and healing and growing and healing and growing. And what's so exciting about this to me too, Ben, is that we get to do this in community, that there are people like you and me and the incredible amount of people that are doing this work right now that are visible and active and want to have this conversation. That's the stuff that really excites me.
Oh my gosh. I love that we're using the same language, literally, Jen. That's what really excited me to be on your show, because what you just described about asking the question, why does it trigger me? And then just letting it be and see what answers unfolds for you. I mean, that's why I did one of my recent episodes on 37, leaving the light on. I go through this whole story of this ordeal and this trauma I went through, but then I didn't realize, why does it trigger me? What was the autopilot that was installed in my subconscious? And so I'll just say, if you're curious about learning more about that, I really would recommend people to listen to episode 37, because it really dives into when you have an experience, especially if it's a negative experience like a trauma, you, knowing or not knowing, will create a belief system in that moment. And whether that serves you or not, you'll see how that unfolds when you get triggered later on in life. And you have the power to rewrite what that belief system is so that you don't get triggered anymore. But the question is how.
How cool is that? Yeah, right. But how cool is that, right? Yeah. And the question is how, but that's why we do this in community. You know, this idea that something catastrophic needs to happen in order for you to go to therapy is ridiculous. We all need people to talk with so we can work through this stuff, because that's part of just being human. And now more than ever, I think it's so important to find your people in a safe place where you can talk about these things so you can actually do this work. And it's wonderful. So the link to that podcast episode, I'll make sure that we put in the show notes too. So it'll be super easy for people to access. And so I do have a question now for you. You know, we talked about something tangible that people can kind of walk away with. If they're listening right now, like, okay, Ben, you know, this sounds great. And like, yeah, Jen, we've heard this a million times from you because we've been listening to your podcast for so long. What do I do today? You know, what can Ben tell us today about something that we can do to shift something in our lives?
Totally. No, thank you for asking that. So I have 4 simple steps. Okay. And this is what I call my morning ritual. So when I start the day after dropping out the kids and then driving back, it's like, wait, how do I frame and set the intentions for today and what I want to accomplish? Right. And so I break it down to 4 simple steps. The first step, step 1, is just calming your mind. Right. And I've been mentioning that earlier before about whether it is a meditation, is it going for a walk? What I created was a 1-minute breath work exercise where I'm just walking you through with the sound of waves, just breathe in and breathe out. Right. If you breathe in, but then you breathe out longer, it actually activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which then really just keeps you at ease. Right. And it's just 1 minute. It's just 1 minute to just calm yourself, to breathe in and breathe out. Okay. So that's step 1. Step 2 is setting your intentions. Now, the statement that I want people to create is, my intention for achieving X is Y because it makes me feel Z. My intentions for achieving X is Y because it makes me feel Z. Now, why is this statement important? Is because if you don't know the why of what you're doing, then going back to the whole hamster wheel, right? It feels like you're just doing a repetition. You don't understand the reasoning, the intention behind it. So knowing the why is an important step, but also knowing how it makes you feel. Now you're really starting to exercise that feeling and hopefully getting closer to that intuition muscle, right? So it's a simple one statement, but it gives you thought on, well, what is my statement for today? Okay. And when you say it and you know the feeling you want and what achieves it, the third step is pick a song that raises your vibration to the similar feeling of Z that you just said. So is it you want to feel more confident? Is it you want higher energy? Do you want to feel more love and self-worth? Whatever it is, I actually created 3 different curated playlists for self-confidence, for high energy, or love and self-worth. So if you don't know a song, you can just be able to download that to see what is it that resonates with that feeling of Z that you just said on the second step. Okay. Now, the 4th and final step, this is probably also the most important. The 4th and final step is making a declaration out loud. You just have to say, Jen, I am blank. What is that word you want to fill in? I am unstoppable. I am worthy. I am love. Whatever word that comes into mind. To make that declaration out loud, why is I am so powerful, Jen? I stands for intentions, A stands for actions, M stands for manifestation. What I put my intentions to, what I back it up with the actions I take, I manifest. I am. So by merely saying out loud, it's you telling your body, I'm making a declaration, I'm taking actions behind my intentions. Then you're one step further manifesting what you want. And all of this, Jen, takes just 6 minutes, right? It's a 1-minute breath work. It's a 5-minute song. And then you're just saying, I am. And it's really simple. But if you just do that and frame yourself to raise that energy and vibration in the beginning of the day, gosh, imagine how the rest of the day is going to be like for you.
That is powerful. Thank you so much for sharing that. It is so simple and it's something that's so easy to just incorporate throughout your day. And I'm so glad you incorporated the music piece too, because it's funny. I just was listening to Pink's new album, Trust Fall. And so I'm obsessed. And that was actually my song the other day where I was just kind of feeling, just meh. I wasn't like excited or I wasn't sad or I was just kind of meh. But I didn't want to feel meh because I wanted to go through my day and my meetings and my interactions with the people that I was going to, my kids, in a different energy space. So I put on Trust Fall and, rocked out a little bit and then that did the trick. And so it's really important to do those steps because it builds on one another. It's not just one thing. It's all the things.
It helps reset your internal framing of what's going on internally, then that's going to set you up as a foundation of what is it that you want to externally build, right? And so it's so simple that you can just do for yourself. And it gives you that practice of being able to feel into more of what is it that I want to do? Because if I have a positive feeling association with it, then chances are I'm going to do it more.
Yes, that's it.
Right. And so, but the link that I'll give you, which is just my website /thank you, right? So benjaminyeh.com/thank you. I'll send you in the link so you can have it in the show notes. Your listeners can download the 1 minute breath work exercise as well as the access to the 3 curated playlists for it. Just have to sign up for Boom Vision community and it's just there for you. So
thank you for sharing that with this audience. And I have to say, I can't believe it's already time, but before we go, I have to ask you the last question, which is, what is your dream for the future of education, Ben?
Oh, what a great question. My dream, Jen, is when we can get to a place where the amount of times we use the word logic, we also use the word energy. I firmly believe our world's going to be in a better place. As much as we use the word logic and activating the logic mind, but we're also understanding we're just all energy. Our thoughts, our words, our actions, money, it's just energy. And if you really, I didn't understand it before, but the more I go into and deep into this work, oh my goodness, if we can associate energy as much as we associate logic, we're going to be in a better place.
Yes, yes. And it's in engaging conversations like this where you start to become familiar with the language and start to learn what it means to talk energy and intuition and body and inner voice. And I'll tell you right now, once you go through that door, you're never going to want to go back.
Yeah.
It's a good door.
And it's a great place to be.
It's a great place to be with the best people. Enlightened, conscious humans. That's my jam.
Yeah, me too.
I'm so glad that we connected as fellow conscious humans.
Yes, I am so grateful, Jen. Thank you so much for having me. And yeah, if the audience has any questions or curious, I invite them to check out Boom Vision because that's what it's all about too.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure all of those show notes for everything that we talked about in the podcast today is going to be right there. So it'll be super easy for you to access. Ben, thank you so much for your time and your talents and having this beautiful, heart-centered conversation with me today.
Thank you so much.
And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure you subscribe and share it with a friend. And we'll see you next time on Take Notes.
Incredible, right? Together, we can revolutionize the face of education. It's all possible, and it's all here for you right now. Let's keep the conversation going at Empowered Educator Faculty Room on Facebook.